The analogy I like to say is that there's a ratchet, but the ratchet always moves to the left. Every time a conservative opinion is uttered, it's a dog whistle. And then every leftist opinion is viewed as they're trying to help.
Mm-hmm.
It's true. Research backs it up. Only a tiny fraction of demonstrations have had any violence at all. So what the president is doing is once again patently false. It's morally wrong. And yes, it is racist.
I think that there's a lot of people more concerned about being precisely, factually, and semantically correct than about being morally right.
Why is it acceptable for someone to walk around with a flag of the USSR? Well, there's a line of Antifa, and they all have the hammer sickle on their helmets of the Soviet Union. This was a place that murdered in excess of 20 million people.
Yeah. And they're shouting death to America.
My family is ethnically Jewish. I hate Adolf Hitler, and I think it should be outside the pale to defend Adolf Hitler. I think that's disgusting. I also think it should be outside the pale to be defending Stalin. But one of those is outside the pale and one is not. And that is years and years and years of work put in to make that the case, of ratcheting to the left.
You're totally right. I've not seen this before. Once it crosses outside of the range of acceptable opinion, it goes all the way in the far dumpster.
That's right.
There's no more explicit concretization of this principle than 2020 going up in flames for months on end towards one direction, apologize minimized, justified, even AOC saying they're hungry, that's where they're...
Maybe this has to do with the fact that people aren't paying their rent and are scared to pay their rent. And so they go out and they need to feed their child and they don't have money. So you maybe they're put in a position where they feel like they either need to shoplift some bread or go hungry that night.
And then one day, I know it was the Capitol building. I know I'm not excusing it at all, but one day, 6 hours, 8 hours of storming and getting out of hand in a different direction.
They egged this on every step of the way because they thought it would win them a freaking election.
And I want to make clear that I know that there are protests still happening in major cities across the United States. I'm just not seeing the reporting on it that I had
that's right.
for the first few weeks.
That's right. But they're not going to stop. They're not going to stop. And they're not. This is a movement. I'm telling you, they're not going to stop. And everyone beware, because they're not going to stop. They're not going to stop before Election Day in November, and they're not going to stop after Election Day. And everyone should take note of that on both levels, that they're not going to let up, and they should not.
They created this violence for short-term gain, knowing the long-term loss, knowing the long-term cost. And they will do it over and over and over again until they experience personal consequences.
Most even centrist, liberal thinking people are like, that is a false equivalency. People aren't able to even put those two things even side by side because one is a threat to democracy itself. The other is just kids getting their yayas out.
When you said one's a threat to democracy, I thought you were talking about the ones all summer. Whoops, my bad.
Well, which one is? Are they not both the threats to civic order?
Of course they are. Camille Foster, I don't know if you know who he is, but he's got a cool show called The Fifth Column. He tweeted an example from the New York Times, and he said, if you drench the coverage, and this is Camille's words, if you drench the coverage in carefully constructed euphemism, it hardly seems newsworthy at all and everything is just fine. He holds up the picture with the headline. It shows Antifa carrying a sign that says, we don't want Biden, we want revenge, with an assault rifle in the middle and some of their other iconography. And then the headline is, protesters call for more radical change. The headline is, protesters call for more radical change alongside that. And that's the New York Times that did that. That's Times that did that. Yep. And so when you frame everything left wing as like it's just kind of normal and okay, or they're just trying to feed their family by stealing a flat screen TV from Target that they're going to burn down later. And then you frame, I don't know if I want to work this year, so my husband's going to take care of me. Oh my God, is spousal abuse. Turn it up to 11 of the most horrible patriarchal misogynist thing you can imagine. You've got a radically asymmetric playing field on which to play. And for some reason that I don't even fully understand anymore, our sensibilities are such that we can't figure out how to grasp this thing, because we generally, I think, believe that progress is good. So clearly that which is on the side of calling for progress, rather than, hey, maybe don't break everything, seems more reasonable or fair-minded or whatever. So radicalism gets equated with progress, and liberalism, which actually creates stable progress, gets equated with not just status quo, but dog whistles for wanting to beat your wife and be a racist and have slaves. And they're somehow effective at making people believe this, which I think is just astonishing.
One of the reasons I'm so optimistic about this nation is that today's generation of young Americans is the most progressive, thoughtful, inclusive generation that America has ever seen.
Liberalism is white supremacy. Liberalism is white supremacy. Liberalism is white supremacy.
When the Ratchet wants to move left, the media will say, oh, nobody thinks that. Oh, nobody thinks that. Oh, nobody thinks that. Once it hits critical mass, oh, everybody knows that. Everybody thinks that. They explore the seams always of the conservative coalitions, and the moderate Democrat coalitions are always explored, and they kind of look and find where those seams are, and they ask wedging questions. And for example, Mitt Romney was going to be asked repeatedly what he thought about what his personal religion said about birth control, right? Hillary Clinton was never going to be asked how many genders are there. And when Biden was asked how many genders there were, he said at least 3. And then when the person kept pushing on, he said, get out here with that kid. And nobody, you don't get to do that to us. We get to do that to you. Sean McHugh talks about this. He calls it simple comment. Every time a Republican president does something wrong, please give us your opinion on that. Every Republican senator up and down at every level gets asked that question. When a Democrat does something horrible, that doesn't happen. That sort of nobody wants to be the one who puts the Republicans in charge. Nobody wants to be the one that's responsible for a Mitt Romney presidency. Yeah. That kind of attitude is going to lead them to put the happiest, smilingest face on all of this stuff. And as people begin to see it trickle down to their kids, and as it gets slowly, people are upset. And once there hits a critical mass of people being upset, that's when your backlash is going to hit. What we need to do, really, a very good thing to do would be to break the Ratchet.
Yeah.
That would be a good move, would be for us to break the Ratchet. Now,
to bring that back, just for the viewer that's tuning in and out as they're doing the dishes, the Ratchet is the fact at this point in time that our culture can only move towards the left, that every progressive step leftward denies everything right of that as beyond the pale or off the charts, or a dog whistle, or so on and so forth.
That's right.
Because for the real Ratchet, if you twist it one way, it moves the screw or the nut or whatever, and then when you go back the other way, it just click, and it doesn't turn the thing, and so it's like that. If you want to help make them upset, here's the question, and it's exactly into the vein that Wokal just busted out, which is, so we have immediately that Biden rescinded the critical race theory executive order that Trump put out in September.
Which wasn't even about critical theory. It was about
It
making
11
government
things that you can't
non-sexist, non-racist.
Sex and race. It had no race scapegoating, no race discrimination, no sex and race scapegoating, discrimination, stereotyping, naming the country as evil. There are 11 things that are named that you can't do, specifically in Section 2. It does not ban teaching diversity training. It does not ban teaching critical race theory, as we heard the lies. That's Section 10. You can read it for yourself. I put an article on New Discourses where you can read both of those sections for yourself and see. And so Biden Biden did rescind that executive order. So by direct deductive implication, there's no inference necessary. He must want to allow for at least one of those 11 things.
Yep.
And so the question should be being asked, which one of those do you want? And what you will find is by the exact dynamic that Wokal just described, that question will not be asked. So the way that you build up that resentment is that you point out that question will not be asked and will not be answered. This is a question that we all deserve an answer to, because we literally functionally have a deliberate step. It wasn't like we crept there and then, oh my gosh, Trump issues the order and we step back from it. We now have a intentional, deliberate step to enable one or more of those 11 things. And it can't be that he's just opening the field for diversity training because Section 10. He's just opening the door for education. No, because Section 10. He deliberately has made a move toward literally institutionalizing systemic racism in the federal government. It has to, or sexism, I suppose. You could get around racism by having sexism instead. That's what it bans, is those two things. And so the question, which of those things has to be asked? And it won't be asked. And if it gets asked by a conservative journalist, most of the conservative journalists have rolled over and they don't even try this same game because they know they don't have media hegemony. But if that question gets asked, it won't get answered.